But the minute that a blood from a child hits one of our decks on our schools, money is not an option. The feds
Floods.
come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the feds come in, the state comes in, and they give that this school district and that school unlimited funds.
Right.
They're never turned down for grants and stuff like that. So why do we have to wait for something like that to happen before we fund this stuff?
You think you know me?
On this day, I see clearly.
You're listening to the Security VIP podcast, hosted by Taylor May, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth. Today on Security VIP, we feature the Director of School Safety and Security of Seminole County Public Schools, Captain Rick Francis. Get ready for nothing but the truth.
Security VIP Nation, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Security VIP podcast, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth. As always, I'm your host, Taylor May. And on today's episode, we're featuring a man who not only speaks the truth, but delivers it inside the K-12 vertical. That's right. When it comes to school safety and security for the state of Florida, Seminole County Public Schools is leading the pack because of their proactive mentality and willingness to be a pioneer in the space. And with the future of the unknown always in mind, Captain Rick Francis has been instrumental in the district's growth and reputation these last few years. So with that being said, it's my pleasure to officially welcome the captain to my podcast today. Rick, how are we doing today, brother?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Of course, man. On to all my listeners and viewers today, I literally met Rick last week, so he doesn't know too much about me or my podcast or my experience. But I met him through my new employer, ZeroWise, he's currently testing at the school district for gun detection. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But Rick, tell us about your experience, man, because I know you're well known here in Florida, but let's get you well known nationwide if you're not already. I would like to expand that footprint. So kind of give us some of your background.
So Rick Francis, was mentioned, Taylor mentioned, I'm the school safety director for Seminole County schools. That's 67 public schools. We 4 years ago, roughly, we entered into an agreement with the Seminole County Public Schools where the sheriff's office was asked to take responsibility for school safety. So the sheriff pulled me into his office and said, "Hey, you're my guy. Make it your own, but we do it our way." So, just a little historical about the school district. They had a civilian that was doing the job, didn't have a lot of experience. And, one thing that I bring to the table is I look at the school safety from a different lens. Just a little bit about my history. Grew up in Central Florida, played ball. Got out of school, went into the military as a flight and combat medic in the military. So I brought that medical experience. When I got out of the military, I went into corporate America. I was a VP for a finance company, Fortune 500 finance company, and honestly just got tired of corporate America and decided to go into law enforcement. The sheriff's office, I've done everything from patrol to investigations, major crimes, domestic security, and of course now school safety. Very rarely in law enforcement do you get to start a division, make it your own, create it, hire whoever you want to help support your team and stuff like that. So I've been very fortunate with that. Some collateral duties I have, worked on our SWAT team as a operator and a sniper team lead. I'm also one of two high-risk incident commanders in our sheriff's office for Seminole County. So if there's a high-risk incident like a school shooting or something like that, of course, myself or him would be the one that's run the whole incident from a command standpoint. I coach youth baseball and football as a little collateral duty that I do with my son's now aged out. He's in high school, but I still work on that. But the nice thing about this is I've taken it from all my experiences from law enforcement, the military, corporate America, and now 4 years of K-12 experience administration. And that's how I look at school safety from that type of lens, which I think has helped me look at things differently. I go into every day planning for the worst case scenario and pray for the best.
So a man of many hats, to say the least, and it's great to hear that experience. But also, what's good, what Rick brought up there, guys, is he's with Seminole County, of course, but he has a board and a superintendent that actually lets him do his job, applies the experience, lets him put proactive security measures into the school district. What I think is very important, because a lot of school districts, and we'll touch on this in a second, Rick, is you kind of hinted on is that reactive approach, right? They're not really proactive. They're kind of in that mindset of like, oh, we don't have kids like that, it's never going to happen here, yada yada yada. But that's not the case here at Seminole County. So give us kind of a layout about SCPIS for those people who are not familiar with the county and what this district is. Kind of tell us the
So
background of that.
Seminole County is in Central Florida, right outside of Orlando, Disney World and stuff like that. The school district, like I mentioned earlier, I'm responsible for 67 schools. It's roughly 68,000 students and 8,000 employees. The nice thing is it's an A-rated school district, which is something that the administrations work really hard to get to that level and maintain that level. And honestly, I look at it, I'm responsible for the most vulnerable in Seminole County. When parents drop their kids off at school or a bus picks them up, takes them to school, I'm responsible for it. And nowadays, and that includes a virtual world. If a kid's at home in a virtual world learning, through our system, we're still responsible for them. So, and currently in Seminole County, we have 3 different learning models: the face-to-face and brick and mortar. We have a connect model where the students at home, but they follow the normal course of study in the classroom. So literally the teacher is teaching the kids that are seated there and also in the virtual world at the same time. And this is a completely virtual learning environment, which is kind of interesting because, after when COVID started, we had to really simply change our ways and from this standpoint and look at school safety from a whole different perspective and of course, education when it comes to that. What's interesting about Seminole County is 4.5 years ago, like I mentioned earlier, the superintendent asked the sheriff if he would assume this responsibility. And of course, the sheriff thought about it for about 2 seconds and said, absolutely. And what's interesting is that the civilian who had my job actually answered to assistant facilities director. And honestly, he was here for 7 years and not to take anything away from his accomplishments, but I really don't know what was accomplished. I inherited a school district that, for example, just to give you some examples, they still had the old style post 9/11 flip charts. If in case of emergency, the principals underneath their desk flipping to a chart, trying to find what they should be doing. They weren't doing a lot of emergency drills effectively. And honestly, the only person that could lock the school down at the time was the principal, which we all know is asinine. With 8,000 employees on the school campuses, so you started looking at changing that, and we were real fortunate. You mentioned earlier about a supportive school board and superintendent and sheriff, and that was, they gave us and my team just really an open canvas to work on. And I looked at a lot of large universities, how those directors were set up, and it's kind of modeled my job responsibilities. But we were very fortunate that we got a lot of good buy-in. And, I hate to say this way, but, Parkland happened a couple hours south of us. We were doing well, but that really, that tragic incident kind of, for the state of Florida, it woke a lot of people up. And if you talk to, I've had some great conversations with, school leaders, and, you ask them, okay, what got you serious about school safety? Was it Columbine, Santa Fe, Parkland, whatever? And, almost all the superintendents I've ever talked to is like Sandy Hook is what kind of put school safety on the map. And here in Seminole County, the superintendent's been talking about school safety even before I was involved. But now we have, obviously put our money where our mouth's at and started really looking at it. They had zero technology, analog cameras. It was a lot of work. Thankfully 4 years later, we're in a very good position now. But we're not perfect. I don't think any other district, but for those that aren't aware, after the Parkland incident, the state of Florida came through with a whole bunch of school safety legislation. And what's ironic is, and that included, having SRD, SRO on campus, the way you do emergency drills and stuff like that. And ironically, when that was signed, we are 100% compliant the day it was signed, because we were already doing threat assessments. We're already locking classroom doors, had a safe spotter, we had all that stuff going on. And honestly, I'll give you another example. I mentioned earlier that we brought forth, the only person who could lock a school down was the principal. And so I brought technology into here, and that was one of my very first technology pieces that I brought to the district, was a soft panic button that had interoperability media-wise, where I can connect to the cameras live, instantaneous notifications, goes to the PSAP, all users on the campus, including my office, the emergency management, fire rescue, law enforcement. So just hundreds and hundreds of instant notifications within 1.5 seconds. So that's just, and then, we started off a benchmark of 50% participation with 8,000 employees. And yeah, we were hovering around that 65% mark, and then Parkland happened, and boom, we're running right now at 87%. And that's, people that with private phones are, putting that device or that app on their phone to have this ability to lock a school down. So we really changed not only, some hardening stuff, but also the mentality. And, we got real aggressive on our officers and deputies going to the school, as far as they go through a litany of about 20 different training courses before they even step foot in a school. And I'm not a big fan of arming teachers or any of that stuff. So they're, everything from a basic SRO class to 2 days with our SWAT team learning CQB and stuff like that. So that's the extent that we run things. We drill every month. We do full-scale exercises, a few times a year, tabletop exercise with VPs and executives throughout the school district. So just always trying to give them, hey, this is the worst-case scenario. How do we get from here? And honestly, when I took this rollover, I came out of domestic security, so I'm thinking terrorists and fugitives and stuff.
Worst the worst, right?
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of. I spent the weekend after getting blessed that this is your job, thinking about how do I take care of the schools. And, obviously I started, getting really up to speed on where the school threat was from. And we all, based on research, is 95% of the threats coming from within.
Right.
When you start looking at school hardening and all these other gadgets and stuff like that, the threats are within, what are you really protecting, we've had to take a real hard look at a lot of that stuff. But, the biggest thing is that we've, we took a system that had a lot of holes in it, and, really looked at anything from, top to bottom, what we could do to make it better. If it was working great, how we break it, make it a little bit better, and that unfortunate incident at Parkland, closer to home for us, really set the bar for getting a lot more people. There's a lot more new principals that are getting promoted and stuff like that, that they are coming up with school safety on their mind, and we had some legacy principals and stuff like that, that honestly, when I came here, I think they thought that they were at the foot of God, and it was their way or the highway. And honestly, I just took an approach as, listen, I'm here to take the burden off school safety from you. Let me be the subject matter expert. Let my guys and gals that are in your campus that are highly trained, let them be that subject matter expert. One less thing on your table. I mean, these principals, and I've learned a lot in, the last several years working in this environment. There's a lot of stuff on their plate. They're custodial, they're weather persons, they're disciplinaries, they're in charge of academics, and on and on and on. We just want to take that role off of them.
So you're addressing a lot of my questions, and you threw a lot at me, which I definitely appreciate. And it sounded like you came into a little bit of a puzzle when you first got there, and you had to consolidate, new technology, unify a platform. And I would have loved to seen the faces of when that new legislation came out, and you said, "Oh, well, we've already done all this shit. We've already implemented all these measures." I would have loved to see their faces, but the reality, the fact is, it's sad in K through 12 when you have to experience events like Santa Fe, Sandy Hook, Parkland, in order for a security to actually implement things. But Captain, talk about the internal battle, because I think this is overlooked sometimes. Were there any internal hurdles that you had to get through to implement these new procedures, or did you pretty much have a seamless process? Because you talked about your principals, trying to put their methodology in place, but what was that internal process inside to get some of these new measures in place?
Well, it's funny, I deal with, I have vendors, and I'm sure every school safety director or specialist is doing this. Vendors, we get solicited vendors almost every day. Everybody's got that magic wand to fix everything. And, I look at school safety from an all hazard layered approach. I mean, there's not one simple thing that I think of resolves everything. But, obviously when I came in here, like anybody else, you want to sit back and, all right, what's going on, what's working, what's not working. And literally my first day on the job, I decided, I'm not a big office guy. I don't like sitting in the office. So I went and visited a couple of schools. And just to give you an example of where we're at, and I speak from Seminole County, but this is, I assure you, systemic throughout at least Florida and not beyond. They were stopped at an elementary school, got out of my work truck and put my jacket on, started walking there right in the middle of a fire drill. And I noticed that they had these pods of kids everywhere with an adult supervisor in them. And I walked up to the young lady, clearly just out of, school. And this is her first job with elementary kids. And I said, hey, I introduced myself, and, I'm wearing a placard and stuff like that. Hey, I'm the safety director. What's going on? Well, we're in a fire drill. And I said, how long have you been in school? This is my second year. I said, do you always come to this spot? She goes, yep, this is my spot. And then the administrator will come around and check all these spots. And you could see around throughout this open field. And so when I went in and talked to the principal, did my thing, and then I came back, talked to the school district fire marshal, aka Fire Marshal Bill, and said, hey, have we always done fire drills this way? I said, I think the last time we lost a child in the fire was 1958. Schools don't burn. We have all these advanced suppression systems and stuff like that. Why are we still doing it this way? And I said, listen, I pay a kid walking to that campus $20 to go pull a fire alarm. I may have to spend a couple bucks, but someone's going to pull a fire alarm for me. And I sit there and I record all these spots where these kids are sitting in this open field. And then I wait a day, a week, a month, a year. I repeat the process. This time I bring my friend. I set up a tactical L with the right glasses, the right rifles, and we can own the school. So my point is, just because we've done something over and over again does not make it make sense. Let's challenge this thing. So those are some of the things like little hurdles. Now, like I said earlier, the new principals coming on, they immediately grabbed on. And then what I found myself doing is starting to do a lot more, quick little educational pieces on the why. And we all know everybody needs to know the why. The technology was the biggest thing. And I found, we educate our officers and deputies that are in the school to go to move this soft panic project out with this app. And we tracked every week, every school, number of employees, number of participation. And then we just started raising that benchmark. And any school that was below that benchmark, I would invite myself to their Wednesday professional development training and say, hey, listen, you guys are sitting at 42%. Here's the why this technology is so important. And it's all the bells and whistles does behind the scenes. And we started seeing those numbers go well. So it took my direct involvement sometimes to get these things moving. And then one of the things that it really took me about 2 years to really recognize is if I can get school students to say the exact same thing that I want to be said, student body or whatever, and have them do the infomercial or the PSA about, hey, we have anonymous tip reporting app, hey, this is important, download on your phone. Me come from me, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But then I get one of the popular kids to say it through their news feed or whatever, and next thing you know, it works. So, that's just leveraging the right things to make the job more efficient. And I think that was one of the latter things I learned was let's engage students in this, make it theirs, and let's face it, at the high school level, we talked to kids about, we changed our drills to be more option-based and decision-basing for the adults, for our employees. Lockdown is our first reaction to an active threat, for example. But I'm here to tell you, are we creating some passive targets? What I mean by, that is our initial thing, but we want adults to make adult decisions. They're teaching our kids, they're that responsible. They should be able to hold the decision. Can I lock the school down? If I know based on information or intelligence, the threat's in building 1, I'm in building 10. Well, I have a lot of options, So maybe my option is get the hell out of town, exit door left and move on. So we started doing a lot of that, and that got a lot of buy-in from the staff. Like, hey, listen, you're trusting us now. Now we're taking the principal out of the equation. Now anybody can lock the school down with this simple push of a button. Now you're saying that, hey, listen, you can leave. And we're even telling students, especially age appropriate at the high school level, for example, hey, if you can get out, leave. Right. You don't stick around for this project. So we've had a lot of that. And, the biggest hurdle for me, the school districts, and it's not just me, I've talked to many of my peers throughout the state of Florida, they operate on a pace that's just literally above stop. It takes a long time to go through procurement processes and stuff like that. Probably my biggest thorn always was legal, because we're cutting edge technology, right. You're always pushing that envelope, and that's what's always my barrier. And then of course, always is the second half of that is funding. Right. I think people believe that, schools just have this, endless, wallet, with property tax or, half-cent tax or whatever the case may be. But I assure you, from sitting in the seat, the school districts are way underfunded. When it comes to like the school hardening, Seminole County's received the last couple of years post Parkland about $2 million every year for school hardening. And that just drops. I mean, it's really just minuscule what we really need to get it done. Right. And I don't know why, federal, state, local have not come together and said, hey, we know the best practice is X, Y, and Z, fence, internal, external fencing, access control, cameras, and get every school to a bare minimum across the United States, public schools, particularly, and fund it to get it to them. So if you want to add the nice little new shiny toy, then that's on your dime. But we're going to get your school up to a certain minimum standard that's agreed upon as the best practice. And then everything above that is on you. I just don't know why we just haven't got there, which is unbelievable.
Talk about, because with all these things you've done, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges here in a second, the technologies you've used for the challenges, but talk about public perception, Captain. What has the response been with the community, teachers, principals, parents, kids, when it comes to new technologies? Do they understand what you're trying to achieve, or do you kind of get kickback every now and then from what you're trying
every
to do?
once in a while you get a little bit, but I think we have a very good relationship with our media in Seminole County. And one of the first things I did was year one and every year thereafter, I host an annual town hall meeting on school safety, and I invite parents. And it's kind of ironic. The very first one I had, we advertise a crap out of social media. We have a system, school messenger, we can send out to all the parents, through email, text message, stuff like that. And we had probably 100 people show up. And, my PIO for the schools, he said, "What's wrong, Rick?" I said, "Well, I kind of expected, people would want to hear about this stuff, because, let's face it, we tried to keep a little bit of our school safety initiatives under our collar, because we don't want to advertise certain things we're doing. And right. Even in Seminole County, I have projects that no one will ever know about behind the scenes that we do it on purpose. Now, I mentioned earlier, research has showed over and over again, 95% plus or minus percent of the threats coming from within. Well, they already know your emergency evac procedures. They know how you're going to handle lockdowns and all that stuff. So you have to have a few little wild cards in there. So getting back to that first parent, meeting, he goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I kind of expected more." He says, "Listen, if someone was wrong, you weren't doing a good job, this place would be filled." So every year we start doing that. And then I actually literally every year before school starts, I send a welcome letter to the parents, and I do it the 4 Fridays before school starts. I just piecemeal the letter, kind of what we're doing, what to expect. Like, for example, if we have a tragic incident in our school, don't come to our school. Don't call, don't come, because you're not going to get there. We're going to block the roads. You're not going to get there. So just kind of setting a tempo and stuff like that, and try to, the media has been really good to us. Anytime we have some technology like the Soft Panic app, we've highlighted that because it's something that I felt was important. It's putting that leverage back into our staff members, and actually, I think making them more part of the system. So that, having those annual meetings with the parents, doing this great messaging, and then we try to do several PSAs throughout the year to kind of highlight what we're doing in school safety and security. And you'll always get, if an incident happens, God forbid incident or a small incident cranks up, you'll get a few messages. And I try to very much, anybody calls, writes, emails, whatever, I try to respond myself, and just let them know. And, sometimes I can tell parents, that are concerned about, whatever, that, hey, listen, we have some stuff going on behind the scenes you're not aware of. And I'm able to kind of, make them feel a lot more comfortable. Hey, I'll give you a great example to that. School threats happen, with social media. And a couple of years back, this has really started going. We got one that was circulating regarding a clown, with a knife, blood, all this other stuff. And it got through one of our high schools really fast. We tried to shut it down as fast as we could. We just couldn't do it. Long story short, that threat was from Atlanta, Georgia. Never was anything.
Wow.
But just got reposted here. And a school that has 2,300 kids in there, there was 200 kids that went to school that day of the alleged threat. Even though we direct message everybody saying we've mitigated it, there's no threat, please go to school. But the sheriff, myself, and the superintendent have every time we do press conferences, we always talk. If we cannot mitigate the threat, and thankfully we've not had this situation, we'll close the school for however long we need to do it. But that day there was 200 kids there. Myself, the superintendent, sheriff, all went and talked to kids, and the kids are like, "Hey, why are you here?" Well, one, my parents made me. Second, we heard, because this is the safest place in the world. You guys are all over the place. We see unmarked law enforcement here, cops everywhere. So that's one thing that, that the social media, love it, hate it. it is what it is, and we have to leverage that. And, we always do a back to school press conference with the sheriff, myself, and the superintendent, again, highlight what we're doing in schools. And just kind of, we always, every year, kind of up until this year, we were highlighting, our soft panic button. We brought on a digital reunification piece and stuff like that. So we're always trying to highlight something that we can talk about.
Yeah, I think the important thing here is education is key, right? And if you're having those open lines of communications with your community, obviously you mentioned a couple wild cards in your back pocket that you have to use on a day-to-day basis. But the reality we live in today, you mentioned earlier with school fires, they don't happen, right? Not like in the 80s and 70s where more frequently, but now today kids are waking up in an environment where there's either a threat going on internally, there's an active assailant threat, active shooter threat. And I want to talk about that more because I hear this a lot right now. And this is why I joined my new employer. I'm not trying to give a plug to my new employer, but the reality of fact is you go to school and you see all these active shooter events happening. It makes kids uneasy. It makes kids, uncertain of what's going to happen. Is this going to happen in my school? Do we have kids like that? So you were featured on the news recently, and we don't have to talk about anything about Zero West, but talk about active assailants and talk about active shooter situations, why that's important for you guys at the district.
So, it's no secret, social media, the news have sensationalized a lot of this stuff. And statistically, the schools are safer than they've ever been. And that's one thing that we try to articulate to our parents or kids and stuff like that. But the reality is these threats do exist. Ironically, as you and I sit here and talk, there is someone planning the next school event, shooting event. Is the way. And, it depends on what research you look at. Some of these plans last a couple hours, some as long as years in the makings. But we spent a lot of time looking at past events. It's no secret that this has been going on since 1700s. Active school shooters. We've gotten more leverage actually out of learning from averted incidents, how districts or law enforcement averted incidents. But I think that the reality is that's something that's driving the news. I was asked to present in front of the House and recently, or a few years back, and the president of the House, we were talking about the importance of having technology in schools and stuff like that. And I was in Texas, and he was doing the math as far as how many school districts he had and how much it would cost and stuff like that. And I made this comment to him, and it resonates with a lot of people after this. And I got a lot of comment about it is, school districts are struggling to get, funding and stuff like that. But the minute that a blood from a child hits one of our decks on our schools, money is not an option. The feds come in, the feds come in, the state comes in, and they give this school district and that school unlimited funds. They're never turned down for grants and stuff like that. So why do we have to wait for something like that to happen before we fund this stuff? And I will assure you, and I see this real time. I mean, I go up and lobby every year on behalf of the school safety directors in Florida on changes. I mean, I mentioned 2 years ago, in a matter of 3 weeks, they pushed through some legislation. Some of it's excellent. Some of it had a ton of holes, which they knew about. In the following year, they tried to fix some of it. We still have some little bit of holes in there. But, honestly, and we were told, not only from the Senate side, but the House side, it's like, listen, we're tired of talking about school safety. And they're being honest. And the further we're away from an incident, and I've seen this real world Central Florida, I've seen it in the state of Florida, I've seen it, talking to peers outside of Central Florida, in the state of Florida, that, the further we get from these tragic events, the less attention school safety gets and the less funding and other attention that happens. The state of Florida, I've seen Texas is kind of moving that direction where they've, now there's a person like me now that is required in every school district in the state of Florida, which is a big step. Let's face it. Some of my peers are, some prior military ladies and gentlemen. Some have law enforcement experience. Some have zero experience that are running these school districts. So, we've tried in state of Florida, as myself and several others have tried to establish a best practices and share. I share anything and everything. Take my name off it, put your logo on it. I don't care, as long as we're benefiting the kids. So, that's kind of how we've looked at it and tried to make sure that, we were postured to it's ironic when that Parkland incident happened, before that individual was placed in handcuffs, already had media requests. And I refused for 3 weeks to even talk to the media because I didn't want them to compare that county with my county because I thought it was fair. We just, and again, we're not perfect. We just had the ability, the superintendent and the sheriff said, hey, listen, let's make this a priority. And even I talked to my sheriff several times over. Hey, what made you think about doing this? He goes, I was worried about terrorists. I didn't think the threat was coming from within. But of course, we ran with the ball, and we've had very little barriers in there. Like I mentioned earlier, that funding's always going to be an issue in a K-12 arena. We get that. We try to work around it. We have some wonderful business partners that we partner with that actually are doing it for the right reason, trying to protect kids. Not and listen, if you can get the job done, take care of a school district or whatever, and also make money, hey, my hat's off to you. But we've seen unfortunately, companies come and go where they're just interested in turning that dollar.
Yeah, we need proper legislation, and I hate to say it, man, but I feel like politics prevents a lot of shit from happening, especially in K through 12. But so, I mean, my next couple of questions, my last final questions, Rick. You mentioned a lot of good points there, a lot of different technologies that you guys use and what your approach is, and I can hear the passion in your voice, and I think it's important to convey that with everyone listening to this podcast. Is when it comes to K through 12, we need guys, especially like Rick, at the seat of the table, making these judgment calls, making these proactive security measures. But Rick, what's your message to other ISDs, other school districts, when it comes to a director of security, director of technology role? What's phase one when it comes to school safety?
I think, I've been asked several times, what were your priorities? My very first thing is, we had, some officers and deputies in school. Day one, obviously, I moved to having a trained officer and deputy in every single school. I mentioned earlier, I'm not interested in guardians. In the state of Florida, we have a term called guardians, which, it's an armed person that's got some training and stuff like that. There's been discussion about other areas, arming teachers, stuff like that. We all know, especially paramilitary people and stuff like that, our guys are trained de-escalation and stuff like that. Even in, we train all the time on, active threat scenarios and stuff like that. And I've seen the best of the best make errors, what we call blue on blue situations where they're coming around a corner, see a person with a gun, they're shooting. I mean, especially when there's noise stimulus and stuff like that. So my first priority was always making sure that I had the most highly trained officer or deputy in school. And honestly, I've seen school districts in areas where they have some people there. Of course, again, state of Florida has changed their rules and laws when it comes to this. But prior to those changes, it was, if they did have law enforcement, and it was a retirement spot,
Right.
And I'm not trying to make my guys and gals, I have just under 100. I'm not trying to make them SWAT operators or tier 1 operators. I'm not trying to do that at all. However, when that bell's rung, I expect them to handle the job. I expect them to go out. I'm sure you've heard the term hunters and howlers. I'm convinced in every single situation I've seen U.S. school shooting history since we've historically in U.S. These individuals are joystick jockeys. They play some paintball. They're not tier 1 operators going into our school. Thank God. To do this, they've gone on a pathway of violence. They're headed to our school, and we've reached a point where somehow a lot of things have been missed through the threat process. But now they're at our doorstep, and we train our deputies and officers. Listen, if you can't eliminate the threat, at least engage them, get them to stop the killing. I'm convinced these individuals that go into our school, they cannot be hunted and be killing at the same time. Their mind hasn't gone there. I've met very, very few, even SWAT people or tier 1, of course, tier 1 people or special forces are able to do that, but very rarely do you meet even standard military people that can do both. Be hunted and be killing at the same time. They just can't do it. So our job is to listen, if you can't eliminate the threat, stop the killing, and then we'll get the resources there to handle it. So that was my step 1. Step 2 is just engage technology that works. That's all hazard, all approach. We're not operating in silos. I mentioned the soft panic button with multimedia interoperability. So as soon as they touch it, we own the cameras, and we have some other things that go on backstage that handles. We've brought in digital reunification. We have a anonymous tip reporting app. Now I've worked with other vendors for 3 years now, trying to, with artificial intelligence, machine learning, trying to get weapon detection, and either through magnetic or microwave technology. And that technology will get there eventually, but it's just not there for, I've not seen it work well enough in a K-12 arena for me to say, you know, hey, I'm going to put this in every one of my schools. Now I'll move into now where we're at with Zero Eyes, for example, where we're using our current technology with our nice cameras, where we can immediately detect a weapon using AI technology. And the unfortunate part, like 0 for 4 when it comes to getting this technology grant funded. I think the federal government and the state are just scared right now, or just there's not enough case examples where K-12 arena has used this technology and successfully and had it grant funded or stuff like that. So that's really I like to see, you know, one, have an SRD, SRO on the campus that's highly trained. Secondly, engage technology that works. I will tell you, just like every school safety person that is in these seats, they're getting bombarded with people that have, you know, I've heard all the craziest stuff from, you know, door barricades to, you know, shot detection and on and on and on and on.
Latest and
honestly,
greatest, right? They got the latest
yeah,
and greatest.
and they will sell it to say, hey, this is the magic wand. This is your
Yep.
silver bullet. This will resolve all your problems. And, you know, you have to take a layered, all holistic approach when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I simply just, there's not one single tool that'll do that, but if you add these layers in there, and I think that's where most people are successful. You have to have this thing. And then lastly is, you know, I mentioned earlier, you know, I treat every day as the worst case scenario and pray for the best. I mean, when it comes to drilling, emergency drills, my emergency operation plans, our exercises, I mean, I just treat it like every day is the worst case scenario, and we're going to plan for it. I mean, we have redundancy communication systems, plans. We have, you know, exercise using decision-based, option-based, you know, just to try to put everything in our favor. We all know that when that person shows up at our doorstep, almost the whole entire situation is in their favor. So I just got to start getting them out of that OODA loop where it starts to benefit us, you know, by changing certain things, maybe seeing something that, like, for example, the weapon detection system where they're, hey, we didn't know this existed. Now, and we all know in these incidents, we've read thousands of after action reports and averted incidents where, you know, communication, you know,
Right.
especially when it comes to this stuff, is like, oh, there's 2 shooters, 3 shooters. I mean, law enforcement always operates on a +1 rule. So does the military.
Right.
But if you use the right technology, I mean, you eliminate all the questions. We know there's only one shooter. We know this is what they're wearing, this is what they're carrying, and stuff like that.
So a lot of good points there, guys, that Captain just brought up. You know, kind of to summarize what he just said in 3 kind of key points. The first one, you know, coming from a kill or be killed mentality, having that proactive nature. I think that's point number 1. Second point, best in breed technologies, partnering with the best in breed technologies. Something I always stress all the time, right? And Captain stressed on it is, you know, having that holistic approach, that proactive approach, but not relying on one single technology to solve all your problems. And finally, that third kind of point that Captain just brought up is preparing for the unknown. How are we future-proofing our system? How are we preparing for the worst of the worst? An active shooter scenario, a sex offender, an expelled student, or a disgruntled employee, whatever it may be, you know, what measures do we have in place to prepare for that? So really good points there, Captain, that you brought up. And my last question, just an overview question, is 2021, man. We put 2020 behind us. I'm hoping COVID-19 gets the hell away from us sooner or later. But what are some goals for you, man? What are some goals for you this year?
Well, I kind of touched on this a little bit. I have one last project I want to get across the finish line, and that is the weapon detection. I just think that that's the only missing layer I have using that AI technology that I want to get across the finish line. And to my point earlier, I'm a firm believer that we're going to face more complex emergencies in our schools.
Right.
I think this active shooter stuff is going to evolve into stuff we haven't seen before, multiple you know, incidents simultaneously being hit or stuff like that. And I think that's kind of where I'm at now. I mean, you know, I've looked hard about our large events, you know, football games and stuff like that. I just think that's where we're evolving. Drones. There's a term called swarming. I'm sure you've heard of that before. That's where I think that's where my focus is. I really want to get this AI technology across the board, and I really want to just firm up that these complex events. I strongly believe that the next wave of stuff we're going to see is that a little bit more complex stuff we haven't, stuff that, we haven't seen before, we haven't trained before. We try to even in our full scale exercise, we try to throw all kinds of wild cards in there. But I think either through drones or whatever, we're going to see a very different evolvement of the threats we're going to see in our campuses, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And you hinted on AI. AI is kind of that next wave here in the industry. We started with physical security. We started with video management. We started with audio. And then you have AI, computer vision, which is kind of that next wave. And it's hitting the industry strong. A lot of good technologies are coming out. But to your point again, it's making sure we partner with the right guys in the space that, kind of stay in their lane, essentially. So, Captain, I would say I would love to have people reach out to you and gain insight, but just going from this call on our podcast, I heard a lot of emails in the background. You're getting blown up constantly. So I know, guys, Captain, I shit you not, he gets blown up probably 20 times a day, from manufacturers to probably consultants to media, whatever it may be. So I'm not going to share any of his personal information on here. You guys can test your own luck if Captain wants to respond to you. But Captain, I definitely want to thank you for taking the time today, brother. I was happy to speak with you. For those who have questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me at info@securityvip.net. Once again, that's info@securityvip.net. I post all my episodes on my social media sites, so LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. So make sure you guys stay in touch to check out our episode here with Captain Rick Francis. Thank you guys for the time again. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
You better recognize